The Galactic Council falls into panic when humans refuse to talk, HFY. The Galactic Council was a marvel of the universe. Floating high above a shimmering blue gas giant, its massive spire-like chambers reflected the light of 1,000 distant stars. Delegates from hundreds of worlds filled the assembly halls. Some had 3 heads, others had glowing skin, and a few could communicate only through telepathy. Every species had its own way of thinking, but all were united in one common belief. The Galactic Council spoke for the galaxy. That belief, however, was about to be challenged. A small human starship appeared at the outer edge of the Council's orbit. Unlike the massive, towering vessels of the alien delegates, the human ship was modest, almost plain in appearance. Its hull was silver, smooth, and compact. But what it lacked in size, it more than made up for in speed and precision. The alarm systems of the Council flared immediately. "Unknown vessel approaching," shouted a multi-limbed delegate, its voice a mixture of clicks and high-pitched whistles. "It does not match any registry in the galactic archives." Telepaths sent their probes, attempting to read the minds of the humans aboard, but the probes bounced back as if hitting a wall. Every delegate was stunned. Never before had a species resisted mental reading so completely. Inside the human ship, Captain Elias Monroe and his crew moved calmly. Monroe was a tall man with short-cropped hair and steady eyes. He did not panic, even as the alarms blared around him. His crew mirrored his composure. Each human had a specific task, and each executed it with quiet confidence. "We are entering Council space," said Lieutenant Harper, a young officer who still had traces of nervousness in her voice. "They are going to expect us to speak, I think." Monroe shook his head. "Let them expect," he said simply. "We are not here to play by their rules." As the human ship approached the Council spire, the delegates gathered in a frenzy. Holograms of the vessel projected across the chamber, showing its sleek lines and small size. The Council had never seen such a ship, small, efficient, and clearly built with purpose. "This is an insult," growled one of the Council elders, a 4-eyed, tentacled species known as the Grelth. "They should announce themselves. They should speak. This is how the galaxy functions." "Perhaps they are ignorant of our customs," suggested another delegate, a shimmering, translucent being called Vera. "We should teach them." The humans docked their ship quietly, without fanfare. They did not respond to the Council's attempts to communicate. Delegates projected their voices, used gestures, and even tried mental broadcasts, but the humans remained silent. They moved with calm precision through the docking bay, their faces neutral but alert. The Council erupted into argument. Some demanded immediate action. "We cannot allow this. They could be spies or invaders." Others were curious. "Why would a species ignore the Council? Perhaps they are superior in ways we do not understand." Monroe led his crew into the main chamber. They did not bow, did not gesture excessively, and most of all, they did not speak. They simply stood observing. "Impressive," whispered a young Vera aide. "They do not react with fear. They do not panic. They just exist." A telepath tried again, reaching into Monroe's mind. This time, the Council watched, expecting some kind of mental communication. But Monroe's mind was empty of their probing. It was quiet, organized, and unreadable. The telepath recoiled, struggling to comprehend the impenetrable mental shield. "This is impossible," the telepath muttered. "Their minds, they do not respond. Nothing, no thoughts to read. How can a species be like this?" Panic began to spread through the Council. Delegates shouted over one another, calling for rules to be enforced. "They must speak. It is required by the Code of Galactic Assembly." Monroe simply stood with his hands behind his back. One by one, the Council's finest minds and strongest leaders tried to force communication. Still, nothing. The humans refused to talk. A particularly nervous delegate, a metallic being called K-Thrall, nearly trembled as it demanded, "You must answer. Who are you? What is your purpose here?" Monroe finally lifted his head and made a small gesture with his hand. It was simple, almost polite, nothing more. And yet the silence that followed was heavier than any words. The council began to realize something terrifying. The humans were in control, even without speaking. Some delegates attempted intimidation. The chamber vibrated with energy as alien powers were unleashed, hoping to scare the humans into submission. Beams of light, shifting gravitational fields and psychic pressures were applied. But the humans adjusted, moving with calm awareness. They dodged, they adapted, but they never fought back aggressively. They never spoke. "The audacity," hissed the Grelth elder. "No fear, no reaction. They are beyond our expectations." Meanwhile, a young researcher named Lyra Tikan observed quietly. Unlike many others, she was fascinated. She noted every movement of the humans, every calm breath, every small, deliberate action. "They are teaching us something," she whispered to herself. "Not through words, but through presence." Hours passed. The council grew exhausted. Humans did not tire. They did not complain. They only stood, moving when necessary, silent but observant. Delegates began to question their assumptions. Could a species survive, thrive, and perhaps even dominate without speaking a word? Monroe's team began simple demonstrations of their abilities. A small holographic map of the council's failing energy grid appeared. Without explanation, the humans approached and corrected the malfunction in minutes. Delegates gasped. Systems that had baffled the galaxy's greatest engineers were fixed effortlessly. "Unbelievable," muttered a senior scientist from the council. "They are small, yet they can outperform centuries of our technology." Monroe did not look proud. He did not bow. He simply gestured toward the repaired system and stepped back. The human silence had become louder than any words. The council convened an emergency meeting. Telepaths, engineers, and diplomats argued fiercely. Some wanted to declare war. Some wanted to flee. Others, like Lyra, wanted to understand. One thing was clear: humans had upset the established order of the galaxy. By the end of the first day, the council fell into an uneasy quiet. The humans had not spoken, had not demanded, and had not fought. They had only arrived, observed, and acted where necessary. That alone had thrown the galaxy's greatest assembly into panic. Monroe stood at the edge of the chamber, looking at the delegates. He allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile. The human silence had spoken volumes. Somewhere deep inside the council, doubt had begun to grow. Perhaps humans were not like the others. Perhaps their quiet strength and calm control were something no alien species had encountered before. And that doubt, small as it was the seed of panic. The Galactic Council had believed it controlled the galaxy through words, laws, and tradition. But humans had arrived, refused to talk, and shown that sometimes action and presence mattered far more than speech. As Monroe turned and walked back toward his ship, Lyra Tikan followed him with her eyes. She whispered to herself, "I must learn from them before the Council destroys what it cannot understand." The humans had not said a word, yet the galaxy already knew one undeniable truth. They were unlike any other species, and the Council's order would never be the same again. The Galactic Council was in chaos. After the humans' silent demonstration of skill and composure, panic had settled over the delegates like a shadow. They could not understand how a species so small, so quiet, could possess such power and confidence. Council chambers buzzed with heated arguments. "We must act," shouted Cathrall, the metallic delegate. Its voice reverberated sharply through the hall. "We cannot allow them to remain silent. They will disrupt every council law and every agreement we have." "No," said another, Vera, her translucent body shimmering with frustration. "We cannot rush. They are different. Perhaps we need to study them before we act. We might learn something." But the majority of delegates could not see past their fear. They decided to test the humans. Deep within the council's observation complex, a series of simulations were prepared. Alien engineers, telepaths, and strategists worked together to create situations designed to provoke, confuse, and challenge the humans. Every test relied on the assumption that humans would act predictably, like all other species. The first simulation was a battle exercise. A virtual war unfolded on massive hollow screens. Alien warships threatened human colonies, fleets attacked human convoys, and false messages suggested chaos. The humans were placed in the situation as observers. Captain Monroe watched calmly. His crew moved with quiet coordination, noting every detail of the simulation. Other humans were assigned to small control stations, analyzing patterns, predicting outcomes, and preparing subtle responses. "Begin," Monroe said simply, nodding to his officers. The humans did not panic. They did not shout orders or react with aggression. Instead, they adapted. They moved small units to protect weak points, rearranged defensive positions with precision, and anticipated the enemy's moves. The Alien Council members who watched expected loud commands, fury, and mistakes. They received none. One alien strategist, Zorvik, leaned forward, his three heads whispering frantically to one another. "Impossible. They anticipate every move. Every strategy we have ever used fails against them. How is this possible?" By the time the simulation ended, the humans had completed the exercise flawlessly. Not one virtual ship was lost. Not one colonized planet was harmed. The humans did not celebrate. They simply documented the results and prepared for the next task. Panic among the delegates deepened. They cannot be controlled. They do not respond to fear. They do not argue. They are superior in ways we cannot measure, hissed the Grelth elder, pacing nervously. The second test was even more subtle. The council created a series of complex logic puzzles, impossible sequences, and intricate traps. They believed that humans would struggle with alien mathematics, mental patterns, and abstract reasoning. The humans approached the puzzles with calm focus. Lieutenant Harper adjusted a small console, observing the complex arrays with sharp eyes. Crew members worked together silently, using logic, intuition, and collaboration to solve problem after problem. Minutes passed. Hours passed, and one by one the puzzles were completed. The council had designed them to be unsolvable, yet humans solved each challenge. "They are adapting to our thought patterns as if they can anticipate them," muttered Lyra Tikan, her eyes wide with amazement. "Not just adapting, they are improving our methods. They are learning faster than us, using patience and observation. They are teaching us." The council did not notice that some delegates were beginning to feel fear, not fear of war, but fear of being shown as inadequate. Humans did not need to shout, fight, or argue to assert dominance. Their calm efficiency was more powerful than any weapon. The third test was social in nature. Council engineers created a controlled environment filled with moral dilemmas, political decisions, and interpersonal conflicts. The humans were placed in the simulation, along with virtual representations of alien delegates. The aliens expected chaos. They expected humans to argue, manipulate, or make mistakes that revealed weakness. But the humans acted with unity, respect, and fairness. They mediated disputes between virtual delegates, found creative compromises, and maintained harmony in ways that confounded the council. By the end of the day, the humans had completed every test flawlessly. They had solved problems the galaxy's greatest minds could not solve. They had remained calm under stress. They had not spoken a single word, and yet their actions communicated more than any speech could. The council convened in emergency session. Panic and awe were written on every delegate's face. "They cannot be challenged by our usual methods," said Caithrall, metallic fingers clanging on the table. "We cannot read their minds. We cannot trick them. We cannot intimidate them. They are untouchable." Lyra Tikan, who had observed the humans closely, stood and addressed the assembly. "You are missing the point," she said quietly. "They are not untouchable because they are stronger than us. They are untouchable because they do not play by our rules." Silence does not mean weakness. Calm does not mean fear. They are teaching us that our methods may not be the only way. Her words were met with silence. Most delegates refused to understand. Panic still ruled the chamber. That night, Monroe and his crew returned to their ship. The council believed the humans would be confused, tired, or unsettled, but the humans had expected the tests. They had observed, learned, and acted with foresight. "We need to show them something more," Monroe said, pacing slowly. "They think silence is defiance. Let's show them it is understanding." The next day, humans acted without words. They demonstrated advanced engineering techniques, repaired broken council systems, and optimized energy flows across the chamber. Systems that had baffled alien engineers for decades were corrected in minutes. Delegates gasped as machines hummed to life, lights flickered steadily, and environmental controls stabilized. Some delegates were furious, some were frightened. A few, like Lyra Tican, were inspired. She whispered to herself, "They are showing us what true intelligence looks like, not through arrogance, not through power, but through observation, patience, and action." The council tried one last method. A secret vote was held to decide whether the humans should be removed by force. The results were mixed. Half the delegates wanted immediate attack. Half were too fearful to act. None could predict what the humans would do if provoked. Humans, of course, did not respond to the vote. They continued their work quietly, efficiently, and without complaint. The council's panic reached a peak. Leaders shouted, telepaths scanned, and engineers prepared defensive measures. But humans remained calm, silent, and observant. In their silence, they spoke louder than any delegate ever could. Monroe approached one of the council's senior systems. With subtle gestures, he demonstrated a new method for stabilizing energy currents across the chamber. Delegates who watched could not hide their awe. They realized that humans were not only solving problems, they were improving systems, thinking ahead, and doing so without demanding recognition. Zorvik, the alien strategist, muttered to himself, "They do not follow our rules. They do not fight when provoked. They do not speak when expected. And yet, they are changing everything." For the first time, the council began to question themselves. Perhaps humans were not merely another species to be controlled or guided. Perhaps humans represented a new way of thinking. As the sun of the gas giant cast a soft glow over the council chambers, Monroe and his crew prepared to depart. They had proven their point without words, without aggression, and without defiance. Their silence had unsettled the galaxy's most powerful delegates, and their efficiency had earned quiet respect from a few who were wise enough to notice. Lyra Tican watched them leave, feeling a mix of fear and admiration. She understood that the humans were not like other species. They had patience, unity, intelligence, and courage. They had not spoken, yet they had commanded attention, respect, and fear. The council, however, was not yet ready to admit defeat. Panic still simmered beneath the surface. Many delegates believed that human silence was a challenge that had to be broken. Others, fewer in number, began to understand that the humans' actions were teaching a lesson in humility, strategy, and patience. Monroe looked back at the council one last time. He allowed himself a small, knowing smile. In silence, he had communicated more than any words could. He had shown the galaxy that humans were unpredictable, intelligent, and capable of thinking beyond established rules. And the council, for all its power, had no choice but to acknowledge one undeniable truth. Humans were not like other species, and they were only beginning to show the galaxy what that meant. The Galactic Council was quieter than it had ever been. Not out of respect, not yet, but out of uncertainty. The humans had completed every test the council had thrown at them. They had repaired broken systems, solved impossible problems, and remained calm under constant scrutiny. And still, they had not spoken a word. Delegates whispered among themselves, their voices tinged with fear. "How do we deal with them?" one asked. "They do not play by our rules. We cannot intimidate them. We cannot trick them, and we cannot predict them." Some delegates, like Cathrall, the metallic one, clenched its hands in frustration. Others, like Vera and the young Lyra Tikan, realized that humans had done something even more remarkable. They had forced the council to rethink its own assumptions. Monroe and his crew had returned to the council chamber at dawn. They moved with the same quiet confidence, their steps measured and purposeful. They were here for a reason, though it was not immediately clear to the delegates. The council's emergency session began. The delegates were divided. Some demanded immediate action, some wanted to flee, and a few, including Lyra, wanted to understand the humans. For the first time, the council's power felt uncertain. Monroe approached the center of the chamber. His crew followed silently, standing behind him in a line that showed order, discipline, and unity. The chamber felt heavy with anticipation. "This is your final opportunity," Cathrall said, its metallic fingers clanging on the table. "You must explain yourselves. Speak. Why are you here? What is your purpose?" Monroe did not respond. He simply raised a hand and gestured toward a large holographic display at the center of the chamber. The humans had prepared something unlike anything the council had ever seen. The display lit up with streams of data, diagrams, and simulations. Humans moved quickly, pointing to different sections, adjusting sequences, and showing solutions. They demonstrated how simple cooperation, observation, and patience could solve problems that had confounded the galaxy for centuries. The council gasped. Systems that had required weeks of work, thousands of engineers, and centuries of accumulated knowledge were improved in minutes by humans. The technology, the strategy, and the problem-solving were simple in concept, but executed with precision, efficiency, and intelligence that far surpassed expectation. Vera whispered, "It is not the machines, it is them. Their minds, they see patterns we cannot see. Their calm allows them to understand." Monroe stepped forward and made a simple gesture. The humans had prepared a message, not in words but in action. They demonstrated the values of their species: cooperation, respect, patience, and foresight. They did not argue, demand, or fight. They only showed quietly that intelligence and unity could accomplish what force and speech could not. The delegates were stunned. Panic was replaced by awe. The council had assumed that power came from dominance, communication, and intimidation. The humans had shown that power could come from understanding, observation, and calm action. Lyra Tikan, who had observed the humans closely from the start, stepped forward. "You see it now, do you not?" she said. "They have not spoken, yet they have communicated more than any of us could imagine. They have shown us that our rules, our assumptions, and our arrogance are not the only way. Silence does not mean weakness. Patience does not mean fear. They are teaching us what it means to be truly intelligent." Cathrall growled in frustration. "This is unacceptable. They refuse to acknowledge the council. They refuse to follow our laws. They refuse to speak." Monroe made a small motion with his hand, and the humans began to demonstrate one final lesson. They projected a simulation of the council's galaxy-wide network, showing points of tension, areas of conflict, and regions at risk of failure. Without speaking, they rearranged flows, optimized connections, and resolved long-standing problems that had caused friction among countless species. The council realized the truth. Humans were not defying them out of arrogance or disrespect. They were showing the council a new way to think, a new way to act, and a new way to solve problems. Some delegates began to bow their heads in respect. Others stared, unable to comprehend what they had witnessed. And a few, like Cathrall, remained furious, unwilling to accept that humans could achieve so much without shouting, demanding, or fighting. Monroe finally stepped forward. He made a single, deliberate gesture, a wave of the hand that symbolized respect, unity, and the willingness to cooperate. The humans had communicated without words. They had spoken without speaking. For a long moment, the chamber was silent. The delegates looked at one another, realizing that their panic, their fear, and their assumptions had been challenged in ways they could not ignore. Lyra Tikan spoke again, this time addressing the entire council. "The humans are not our enemies," she said firmly. "They are not a threat in the way we feared. They do not demand our submission. They do not fight for dominance. They act with intelligence, foresight, and calm. They are teaching us whether we understand it or not, and it is time we listen." The council slowly began to nod. Even Cathral, though reluctant, recognized the truth. Humans were not like other species. Their power was not in aggression, their strength not in numbers, and their influence not in speech. Their strength lay in observation, strategy, and unity. Monroe looked around the chamber, his expression calm but resolute. The humans had accomplished what the council could not imagine. They had forced the galaxy's greatest assembly to respect them without a single spoken word. Delegates began to approach the humans with cautious curiosity. They asked questions, offered cooperation, and even sought advice on problems that had long challenged the council. Monroe and his crew responded through gestures, demonstrations, and subtle guidance. Words were not needed. Actions spoke louder than any speech. Over time, the council adjusted. They began to incorporate human methods of problem-solving, collaboration, and observation into their own decision-making. They realized that the humans' refusal to speak had not been defiance. It had been a lesson in humility and intelligence. Monroe's crew prepared to leave the council for the final time. They had accomplished their mission. They had shown the galaxy that humans were unique, capable, and wise in ways that others could not immediately comprehend. Before departing, Monroe made one final gesture. It was simple, respectful, and deliberate, a symbol of partnership and mutual understanding. The council understood instantly. Humans had not come to dominate, control, or conquer. They had come to teach, to observe, and to show what a species could achieve through calm, intelligence, and unity. As the human ship rose into the stars, delegates watched in awe. Lyra Tikan whispered to herself once more, "They have changed everything. The galaxy will never be the same." The council chambers remained silent for a long time after the humans departed. The delegates reflected on what they had witnessed. Panic had given way to respect. Fear had turned into admiration, and understanding had begun to replace arrogance. The humans had proven that sometimes the most powerful actions required no words. They had shown that intelligence, patience, and unity could accomplish more than force or speech ever could. And they had reminded the galaxy of a simple, undeniable truth. Humans were special, not because they shouted, fought, or demanded, but because they thought, observed, and acted with purpose. In the following weeks, the council implemented new protocols inspired by the humans. They began to value observation over arrogance, strategy over instinct, and cooperation over competition. The galaxy slowly started to shift, guided by the silent lesson the humans had provided. And somewhere among the stars, Captain Elias Monroe and his crew traveled onward. They did not boast, they did not shout. They simply moved forward, ready for the next challenge, confident in the knowledge that their species had made a lasting mark on the galaxy. The Galactic Council had once feared humans. Now they respected them. And that respect, earned through silence, action, and intelligence, was more powerful than any words could ever be. The humans had arrived, observed, and acted. They had refused to speak, and in doing so, they had spoken louder than any voice in the galaxy. The council would never forget it.